So Glorious sent me the Model O- wireless early for review, and I was actually really excited to try it out since I've started to like these smaller mice more and more in the past couple of months. Included in the box is pretty much just the mouse, a USB-C charging cable, an extender and the dongle. The build quality is now really good as it's also on the Model O wireless. There is no flex, no creaking and no rattle whatsoever. But to me the mouse does not feel high quality as the coding has kind of a cheapish feel and it's not very grippy. It's an issue for me, but mostly only when I try to fingertip grip this mouse, as I'm not that comfortable with that grip style. And I need a grippy coding when I fingertip grip a mouse, otherwise I feel like I lose way too much stability or control. The main mouse buttons are using the Kammyz GM 8.0 switches, and the implementation on the Model O- wireless is very snappy and tactile, but these are not the lightest to actuate. So these are not the most spammable mouse buttons, but I did not have any issues in game myself. There is some side play on both of my buttons, but it's nothing that I could actually feel in real use. The clicks are also fairly consistent, so it does not matter that much where I click the button from, but there is some difference in the click feeling of the left and the right mouse button. There is some pre-travel on both my buttons and there is a medium amount of post-travel, but I actually do enjoy that post-travel because it makes the clicks feel a little bit softer. The side buttons are quite small, but they are really nice in regards of click feel on my unit. There is pretty much no pre-travel and no post-travel, and they are really snappy and tactile. I would say these are very good for games and general use, but some people will not like the fact that they are so small. The scroll wheel feels pretty much exactly the same in all the Glorious mice that I have here. It's quite smooth, but the steps are still somewhat defined. The scroll wheel button requires sort of a medium amount of force to actuate. This is definitely usable in games. The weight is specified to be 65 grams and it's exactly that on my scale, and it's fairly balanced as in it doesn't feel front or back heavy at all. But for this size, 65 grams is actually not that lightweight, as the Superlight and the X-Lite wireless are both measured at 60 grams and the Ultralight 2 is actually 53 grams. That being said, the mouse is definitely lightweight, but I would have preferred to see it under 60 grams just as the wired version was. Just like previously, the Model O- wireless has 4 pure PTFE feet and the glide is very good on all surfaces. One thing you might notice is that a rough surface like the Artisan high-end does feel significantly rougher with small feet than with larger ones. In regards of the shape, the Model O- wireless is very low profile, quite flat and very thin. But at 120mm it's not that short. For example, the Ultralight 2 is actually 116mm. The mouse does flare out somewhat to the back and the front of the mouse, but the curves are not aggressive by any means. Still, because of the back flare, I can't really drive the mouse towards the bottom of my palm, and that makes it uncomfortable to claw. This sadly also means that most of my palm will be touching the mouse pad as well. I prefer to have some palm contact in the bottom of my palm, but mostly in the middle and not so much on the sides, and that's what happens with the Model O- compared to, for example, the Ultralight 2. For me, it almost feels like the mouse is sort of pulling my thumb back, and I can't extend my thumb more forward, and that's actually what I would want to do. The main issue on the Model O- wireless ends up being that it's just way too low profile for me. In addition to having most of my palm touch the mouse pad, my thumb, my ring finger and my pinky are almost always in contact with my mouse pad as well. This creates a lot of unneeded friction for me, and it makes it very hard for me to micro adjust with this mouse. Compare that to, for example, with the Model O, where my fingers are always touching the mousepad, but there is way less contact with my palm. Making it a little bit higher profile across the board would make it much better for larger hands, and it wouldn't ruin it for small hands in my opinion. But at the same time, we do have to remember that not every mouse needs to be designed for me, and it's nice to see mice specifically made for small hands as well. In general, I would say that this mouse is not very well designed for a claw grip, but if you have medium to small hands, you might actually enjoy it. For palm and relaxed claw, I feel you need small hands, but you still might struggle with the right front side here as it has so little room. For fingertip grip, it can be good for any hand size unless you struggle with how little room there is on the sides. Or actually even how thin it is. I myself prefer slightly wider mice for fingertip grip because I feel it gives me more control. There are some mice that are somewhat similar to the Model O- wireless, for example the FK2, which the Model O- is inspired by. Then there is also the Ultralight 2, the Xtrfy M42 and also the Pony Symmetrical 2 that I'm gonna compare to it as well. The thing about these is that I like all of these shapes, but not the Model minus. All of these have more pronounced humps, so they are better suited for claw grip, and there is also more room on the sides of the mouse. They are all quite thin, but for example the FK2 is a little bit wider than the Model minus. And basically all of these fix the issues that I have with the Model minus, but in different kind of ways. The battery life isn't very good if you use the mouse with RGB on and brightness at 100. For example, I used mine for about 8 hours for work and 4 hours for gameplay and editing, and the battery life is now at 52%. Outside of this test, I used it without RGB enabled, and then the battery life is good. What's absolutely awesome to see with Glorious is that their wireless performance and their performance overall is very good, especially considering the price. Now after some firmware upgrades, this was already true for the Model wireless as well, and looking at some numbers from Tech PowerUp, it has actually one of the lowest click latencies on the graph. The wireless performance overall is very top tier. It still loses to the Superlight in terms of motion delay, but only just, and you will not feel any kind of difference in game whatsoever. I confirmed the click latency on the Model minus wireless by bump testing, and it seems to be pretty much exactly what it was on the Model wireless as well. So all in all, absolute top tier performance. Let's talk about my in-game performance with the Model minus wireless for a bit, and I just didn't aim very consistently with it. I can hit some nice flicks and I can track quite well, and I can get some nice highlights with pretty much any mouse, but when it comes to consistency, and that's the most important thing in my opinion, for me personally it's just not up to par, for example with the Ultralight 2 or the Pony Symmetrical 2. What I think is most important for consistency in a game like CS, where you need to be very precise with your flicks, is that you need to be very precise and fast with your micro adjustments at times. And that's where the issues start with the Model minus wireless, so if I miss my initial flicks, my micro adjustments just are not sharp and precise enough. I tried all kinds of different grips, for example fingertip grip, pincer claw, relaxed claw, whatever, and nothing really worked very well for me. The main issue for fingertip grip for me is the sides. They are not curved enough, there is not enough room, and it's too thin for my hand size. Then again, for claw and pincer claw, it's not high profile enough for me to comfortably grip it, and for relaxed claw, there is again not enough room on the sides. But as I already mentioned, not every mouse needs to be designed for me. I won't recommend this to anybody with medium or large hands unless you specifically tell me that this is the kind of mouse you want. If you look at the positives and the negatives of the Model minus wireless, in my opinion, there are not that many negative aspects, but one is of course going to be the shape in my personal opinion, and the second one is going to be the coding, as it's not very grippy. For the positive side, build quality and performance is absolute top notch. Then the main mouse buttons and the side buttons are great. Everything else in the mouse is pretty much just good, so I would not place them on the positive or the negative side. For example, the mouse is lightweight, but it also could be a little bit lighter, and the feet are good, but they could also be a little bit smoother with rough surfaces. And the battery life is good, but only without RGB, so I wouldn't necessarily put that in the positives either. But hey, that's pretty much it. In terms of my own in-game performance, it definitely does not beat the Pony Symmetrical 2, but it's way better value for money. Check my wireless roundup right here if you want to see some more information about the Pony Symmetrical 2. It's basically the Razer Viper Mini Ultimate Wireless, or whatever you want to call it. And here is some information about input lag and motion delay. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. If you enjoy my content, hit that subscribe button, and see you in the next one.